He's on the right here. I played him earlier today. I played him with Delver, and he mulliganed to 5 against me one game, crushed me. Mulliganed to 6 against me another game. I had a great hand. He crushed me. Now, we've got the perfect humans on the right.
Yeah.
That's Hike Avetyan with green-white humans versus Noah Koessel with blue-white Delver. Now, talking with him earlier, I asked him why. Why no sideboard? And it's funny because what he said to me was he said that one of his friends basically was like, you can't win the deck. And he's like, I bet you I could. He's like, I bet you I could win it without a sideboard. and
here we are.
Here we are. He's in the top 8.
Yeah.
Now, Hike really is, he seemed really enthusiastic about his deck. And to be fair, I think he's got a very strong matchup against Delver decks.
Yeah, and it was also really funny because he was on the bubble for top 8. It was a tiebreaker situation. So they're announcing, and they're like, and in 8th place,
Hike Avetyan.
like a fraction of a percentage. Hike, and he just screams, "No sideboard!" While his entourage of dudes are all freaking out. So
yeah,
pretty awesome moment.
I am gonna tell you right now that Hike. I keep on wanting to say Hikey, but no, his name is Hike. I'm rooting for Hike. I keep on being reminded in my head of Bob Maher Jr. I told you this story earlier, losing one of the only major tournaments he has failed to really win, the Wisconsin State Championships, losing to Ponza. Bob Maher playing Tolarian Academy, one of the most broken decks of all time, loses to Stone Rain, and the top card on his opponent's sideboard was flipped up by Jake Welch. It was a grizzly bear, and Bob's like, what is that grizzly bear there? He's like, that's my 15th sideboard card. Only need 14 to beat you. And so, Bob Maher losing in that matchup. Let's see if Hike can do kind of a similar thing that Jake Welch did, which is just by virtue of the power of his main deck.
The perfect 60.
Yeah, this is perfect 60 humans.
And it's also awesome because I know Noah's sort of an up-and-coming grinder, so the prospect of losing to a guy with no sideboard would probably tilt him off pretty bad.
Yeah.
So there's a nice little subtext to the game as well.
Now, Hike is actually, he's from a community just north of LA. I don't know which burb he's from, but he said, yeah, the one right north of here. So he's a local player, came down, wanted to show people that he had what it took. And like I said, that's a bet, man. You start the day and you're like, I don't even need a sideboard. I'll show you guys.
Right. So, yeah, this is awesome.
I mean, it's so funny because it is very reasonable for him to face, if he were to win this, for him to face blue-white and then finish against blue-white. That is a path that is possible for him. Some people who have been following on Twitter or on my Facebook page, we talked about the no sideboard, and I think that the two people that really made the comments that I really liked, Patrick, you made a comment on that page about this deck being the Mona Lisa. But then Lester Smerling, great Midwest player, kind of retired from the game now, he said, well, when you've got the perfect 60, you've got the perfect 60.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, not having a sideboard is a strict disadvantage, so I'm not trying to couch this as being like a positive thing. I will say that often if I see any decks that are poorly sideboarded, it's generally speaking aggressive decks because they bring in a bunch of reactive elements and end up just losing their curve and their pacing or whatever. So
yeah, often
it's better to not give yourself every single option afforded to you. Sometimes it's better to keep it simple.
One of the things you said was the Tempered Steel example. You see people sideboarding in Tempered Steel, bringing in so many cards and just stopping being a Tempered Steel deck.
Right.
I remember this being something I was guilty of with Affinity, where I had an Affinity board, and the result was I stopped being an Affinity deck.
Right.
You know, and that's a hard lesson to learn, that sometimes sideboard cards, even if they're good, can weaken your deck.
Yep.
Here we go. Turn 1 Gitaxian Probe.
All right, let's check it out.
Hamlet Captain, I think.
Yeah, we have a Plains and a Township, a Mentor of the Meek, a Gideon.
And that's a Mayor of Avonbrook.
Yep. A what's his name? The white an X for an XX tap to put a counter.
Micaeus.
And then the card, I cannot quite identify the card that is underneath the Gideon.
Yeah, I think that might be a Lawkeeper.
Yes, that's a Lawkeeper.
I played, like I think I said this already, I played against this guy. He was crushing me on mulligans. Delver is one of the matchups he actually is good against. So let's see what happens. Turn 1 Delver after that probe. Cannot make out what he has drawn.
Does he have Dismember in his deck?
He does have a Dismember in his deck.
That's what it looks like to me.
He has Dismember and Gut Shot, as well as Garruk Relentless for removal.
So yeah, he's a lot of the cards you would want to have against a blue-white deck. Secrets.
Now, what does the top of your deck show you? A Midnight Haunting. Lawkeeper is a great answer to Delver, but tying up your mana is not good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good answer on turn 4 or 5, but on turn 1, it's not exactly where you want to be spending your early turns.
Turn 2 Invisible Stalker, that cannot be answered by the tapper. I think the strongest card that Hike has in his deck against this matchup is actually Avacyn's Pilgrim, because it sets him up for explosive curves.
Yes. And these blue-white decks are a lot less impressive if you're able to actually get them on their back foot first. Because they have so much other resources devoted to these like kind of weird tempo plays and stuff.
It looks like maybe a champ. Is that a champ? That is a champ. And that's Champion of the Parish. And then a follow-up here with the Gavany Township.
Pretty much signaling that he hasn't drawn a third land in the intervening turns.
And 1 mana.
For the
Dismember on the Delver. Insectal Aberration goes to the yard.
So this play will look very good if Noah has no equipment, and that 4 life will shorten the clock significantly if Noah is able to actually slap something on the Invisible Stalker.
I can't tell, but I think he might have a Sword of War and Peace in his hand.
He might not have a third land.
Oh.
All right, so we have a game.
No land.
So we have a game.
No land for Hike.
Either player, yeah.
That means he can cast Mikaeus, but I don't think he has any other spells he can cast.
Yeah. And Noah has a Gut Shot in his hand, so using your turn on Mikaeus here is pretty bad.
I mean, I might just do it just because you're without other plays.
Yeah, you have no choice. Yeah, you just have to.
There's the Mikaeus. This will pump up his champion. He's like, hold on a second, there's a trigger there.
Yeah.
He's like, that resolves. There, trigger. It's time to lose a little life, perhaps. I don't mind killing that champ here. There we go. The Lawkeeper just march on in here. Well, maybe. Oh yeah, yeah. Lawkeeper.
With him stalling on lands, he's trading for a Delver here would be awesome.
It might trade for a Delver on the backside too, though. And it's revealed, so it wouldn't have, so. 4 damage, 3-turn clock for Hike. And that is a Sword of War and Peace in Noah's hand.
So Ponder is pretty close to the ideal reveal there, because it's both something to get the Delver flipped over and something to find his third land drop.
Right. I mean, the best possible would have been probe into land, but that would have been like, you know, a Christmas Christmas gift.
Some
Here you
fantasy
go.
land. And that is again not a land.
I'm going to say this game is not the way that Hike's deck normally plays out.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at this and you're like, obviously this guy with no sideboard is going to crumble in front of us. Well, perhaps the gods have decided to take away the luck that has brought Hike here. But I do not think of this as a typical draw. So on our left, if you're just joining us, we have Noah Koessel, the #1 seed at the end of the Swiss. And he is looking like he's going to take game 1 against Hike Avetyan, playing green-white humans, the perfect 60 deck, no sideboard. A Star City Games first, as far as we are aware. Mikaeus becomes a 2/2 at the end of the turn. Is that finally a land?
I believe that's finally a forest, just to give him
Too late.
just enough incentive to drag this out for another turn or two.
Now, for those of you who have not watched very many Star City Games events, one of the things to be aware of is that, unlike the Swiss rounds, in the top 8, players have full access to sideboards and to the deck lists, so they can see the main deck and sideboard of their opponent.
Yep.
For Noah, that actually takes a little bit less time since there is no sideboard for him to look at.
Yeah. He'll just get to sit and shuffle.
Now, look at this. He's straight to the shuffle. That's all he needs to do.
Right.
Hikes down game 1. It's actually kind of funny. Hike also is reminding me of a deck that we called for for Grand Prix Columbus. This is Steve Sadin Columbus. Top 64 slivers, which was in the night before the event. In the hotel room, there's a bunch of Milwaukee Magic players, Milwaukee area Magic players. They're preparing for the event. Owen Turtenwald's asking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I put in this? And we're like, play goblins, don't lose the force, play goblins. Right. And one of those people, Ian DeGraff, had this sliver deck slivers was pretty good at the time. But as a result of spending so much time helping Owen and helping other people, he accidentally ended up registering a 64-card sliver deck, didn't realize it, and he ended up getting 64th place. Perfect. So we called it the top 64 slivers.
Yeah.
Here, perfect humans, perfect 60 humans.
Yeah. Maybe cut a Gavney Township for another green source of mana.
I think he's only running 2 Gavney Townships.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I felt, when the green-white token deck was kind of the flavor of the month when Innistrad first came out. And I remember being really surprised by how greedy that mana base was. Like, they were leaning really heavily on their birds and elves to survive, to actually be able to cast their spells. That was sort of the first point I really feel like Gutshot became a player in the metagame, because that deck's mana base was so fragile. And between its application there and how good it is against, blue-white decks and in and against tempo decks in general, it's sort of become this evergreen part of the format.
And Hike is just shuffling. All he can do is shuffle. But, he looks pretty happy shuffling. And
yeah.
Noah, on the other hand, the thing we're going to expect to see from Noah, I think he's going to bring in a Sword of War and Peace. He's got another one on the board. He can bring in a Gut Shot to go up to 3 Gut Shot if he feels like it. And I think if you saw Gideon, would you bring in Oblivion Ring? Because I think I would.
Yeah, I mean, he has access to the deck list, so he knows what's going on. Yeah, I think, Gideon is such a slog for this deck to get through otherwise that... And he has other Planeswalkers. He has Garruk, right?
Yeah, he's got Garruk and Gideon.
Yeah, so it's hard for Oblivion Ring to be too bad, and there's a lot of situations where that's basically the only card that can get you out of it, so I expect that to come in as well.
What do you think he takes out? Does he take out Mana Leaks?
Well...
Mana Leaks can stop a Gideon, can stop a Garruk, but they also can't stop the early plays.
Right, it's possible I don't know if he has a Divine Offering target.
There are no targets for Divine Offering, so that would be a solid one.
That's an easy cut. And, I mean, he's gonna be on the draw, which makes Mana Leak somewhat worse.
I could see Mana Leak being a play-draw situation card.
Yeah.
When Hike's name was announced, there was a pretty big cheer from his entourage.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I have to imagine, having played him earlier, he seemed like he was somebody that he would definitely be the kind of guy who would be letting his friends know he was going to make it. He was going to make it.
Hike looks unenthused about his opening 7.
Yeah, I would say, oh, look at that. He does not look happy.
He's
thumbs up. Maybe he's just resigning himself to his hand.
This is another 1-land Pilgrim hand. We've seen that reaction before earlier today.
Yeah. And what do we have in play? Turn 1 Champion versus Turn 1 Delver.
Oh, this start seems pretty good.
There we have the Pilgrim. And I said before, Pilgrim is really, really powerful in this match. And it's partly that you just put out too much stuff for them to be able to answer. And there's a Timely, a very good card against Hike's deck.
Do you think you make a Mana Leak Timely Reinforcement sub, whether you're on the play or the draw?
I think that might actually be the exact thing to do. So what we're going to do, and one of the things we were so interested in Hike's deck, we forgot to ask a trivia question. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that trivia question. In our top 8 today, we've had a lot of decks with a particular land that has been very, very talked up. This land is a new land from Innistrad, and it's kind of the backbone of a lot of the decks in our top 8, and that were in the top 8 of Atlanta. What colorless producing land is the card that has been kind of defining the metagame? What colorless producing land has been defining the metagame? Tweet your answers to hashtag SCG Premium, and you can win 3 free months of Premium. Now, back with the game at hand, we can see that after a flurry of plays here with a Vapor Snag, that the champion has been returned. There is a Lawkeeper and an Avacyn's Pilgrim facing off against a single Delver.
So now Noah's got to decide if he actually just wants to fire off the Timely Reinforcements to make 3 guys here, keep the pressure on, or find some other line of play. Seems happy to pass the turn back.
There's a little bit of mush on the end of his Avacyn's Pilgrim, getting that off of there.
So yeah, now the question mark here is like developing his board versus leaving mana up for the Lawkeeper. He's under some amount of pressure, and his hand's powerful, so he needs some amount of time. The other side of that is that, because of Snapcaster, Snapcaster into Vapor Snag, using your mana to leaving your mana up for your tapper might just end up in a wasted turn, which is actually what we just saw.
What Hike needs to do to turn this around, I think, is land a Garruk Relentless and then munch a Snapcaster, and then follow it up perhaps with another Planeswalker.
Yep.
11 is not much life.
I actually think he would be happy to trade his Garruk for a Delver at this point.
You're probably correct, actually. Actually, I think you're definitely correct.
So we're going to trade up here. An Invisible Stalker. So he drew a land, which is a pretty big deal.
I see a Gideon in his hand, amongst other things.
Yep.
2 mana up for Noah. Land. I think you just have to assume that Noah has nothing and play like that's what's going on.
Yep.
If you try to play around cards that Noah has, if he has it, I think you're dead.
Yeah, I think if he has any way to get to stop the Aberration, he sort of just has to cast it right now. Oblivion Ring, which is a
boom.
Yep. That is a big deal.
Pilgrim casts the Lawkeeper once again.
So that's a really good turn. Now he just needs to find a 5th land to land Gideon, and then he can start clawing his way back into this game.
Interestingly, I see Timely in Noah's hand. It's
yeah,
not
that was revealed. It was revealed to the first Delver flip. Yeah.
It's not completely dead, but it's not great right now. Oh, Geist is pretty good.
That is a real good one.
That's a good one. Now Hike is not going to be even helped particularly much by a Gideon.
Well, Gideon
he needs a guy to get in the way.
Gideon is still 2 turns, so it is some temporary reprieve. But whatever he does the following turn needs to be pretty big to be able to.
Yeah, he needs to follow this up with. I think probably best would be a Garruk.
Yep. Well, Garruk's not bad here. Basically, he needs to have something next turn. When he goes, so Gideon's going to go down to, assuming there's nothing else happens, Gideon's going to go down to 1 here. So when he fogs up to 3, he needs to have something that can trade with the Geist. And then the follow-up Gideon can, again, stabilize because then he's only facing down the Invisible Stalker. So the priority now is being able to set up a situation where he can actually just straight trade with the Geist next turn.
Now remember, the Angel does not have to attack the Gideon, and he declines to do so.
Yep.
He comes right in at the Dome. There is a reason for that, but it's complicated judge stuff. A land for Hike. Oh,
and he can't answer the Geist.
Can't answer it. Disappointment abounds. The perfect 60 will not be our champion today.
Yeah, it was a pretty